mindful soul and a believer in simplicity. I have ventured into this world since 2020 to explore a portfolio life. And that means trying to do the things that really matter for me, that truly, truly matters, from mentoring to exploring and traveling the world, is what I've realized it comes down to two main things. My story starts with looking back in Feb 2020 when I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I remember walking into the doctor's office, literally crying for the 30 minutes or so that I had. And the doctor, nothing wrong. It's just generalized anxiety disorder. There's a name to what you're facing and what you're experiencing. I was burnt out. I was stressed out. Everything I was doing didn't matter. I was on autopilot for a good 2 years. I would keep going to the doctor, and every time I would go, they were like, yeah, just don't eat the things that your body doesn't like, was the answer I got, because every time something would trigger and my stomach would get really upset. I would have to run to the bathroom right away. And when you're outside, finding a restroom can be a nightmare. There were times where I was literally on the floor being like, I can't move. Like, I just need to get something out of my stomach right now. And that was rough. But every time it was, okay, don't eat the things your body can't take. Otherwise, you're healthy. Like, I was more than healthy than I needed to be. So I think the doctor couldn't quite diagnose what was happening.
Sure, yeah.
Fast forward to Feb 2020 was when I really understood what was triggering it. I realized work was very stressful. My marriage was getting to a point where it didn't quite make sense the way it was, and I had to really make some choices. And that led to a lot of the anxiety, as if I didn't really understand what was going on. But if I look back, I think I was very fortunate to have the right support system, the right folks coming into my life. I discovered mindfulness. I found communities where I actually felt like there were people who were experiencing similar things or even going through worse things than me. And it was more a gut check to be like, actually, what I'm going through is not the end of the world. I can actually power through this.
Yeah.
But then I found cognitive behavior therapy, and that helped me big time. So just to help me like reframe my thoughts, to help me reorient all the negative thinking, everything that I was doing wrong. So I have what I call my counsel. And I call this a counsel because I initially thought I had like one inner voice, but the reality is there were a couple of them. So I had overthinker Bob, who would always question all of my decisions and make my life nightmare. I always had negative Nancy, where she would always come in and tell me all the wrong things that I'm doing and telling me that I'm never good enough. And that was just enough for me to put myself down. But over time, I realized that every time I would have these anxiety triggers, I learned mindfulness. I learned about breathing. And there was once a time where I was walking on one of my walks after lunch, and I was like, I can feel my stomach is getting that same symptom again. But then I took some deep breaths and I was like, I've got my positive Pam. I can do this. Like, I don't have to sprint to find it. Like, I was in North Carolina at that point, and I was like, okay, I'm going to find, I know Publix is nearby, like 15 minutes, I'll make it to the restroom, but I need to make that 15 minutes happen. And so I was just taking deep breaths. I was like, okay, I can do this. Walked little by little, made it to the Publix, and I was okay. I survived it. And the reason why I tell you the story is because I started to take every day with gratitude. I was like, okay, every day is one moment in time. If today doesn't go well, it's okay. And I knew what had triggered that. There was some conversation I had with family, and something triggered me feeling like, oh, I was not good enough. I was not doing all the right things. And that led to that episode, but I was able to manage it. And I actually felt proud because I was like, by myself, I don't know how I'm going to do all these things. And that's where I always look at positive Pam. I'm like, today might not be a good day, but there's always a tomorrow. And so I've been very, very thoughtful and mindful about every day and appreciating every day. I think even more than I've ever done in the past 39 years. So May 2020 was when I actually made this commitment and a promise to help people, to tell the story, because at the end of the day, we all have our own struggles. But once you start speaking, you actually heal much faster. And that's why what you're doing, JD, is amazing, because I have seen the power of that healing. Like even this morning, I went and spoke with one of our team members, and we were just sharing our anxiety stories, and we were comparing notes, and we were like, oh,
That's it, right?
anxiety
Yeah,
comes in different shapes and forms, but it's
sure.
important for us to be transparent about it and actually be more authentic to myself, because I realized I was doing all the things that was expected of me, that society, family, all the things that were there, but that was not really me. That was not the authentic me. So I've spent the past 3 years to really find who me is and
Yeah,
discover and be, I think, blessed and say, hey, actually, this person, whoever this Div is fine just as she is and good enough. Like, you don't have to like recreate something. And so I've been using the mantra fearless in all shapes and forms,
totally.
and that has actually helped me throughout the journey. And I'm here to help anybody that's going through it, because every time I speak to somebody, when I got diagnosed was when I realized there were two team members in my own team that had similar challenges. And as a leader, as a manager, I didn't even know. I only knew
Yeah,
because I shared my story. So I truly believe in the power of that.
yeah. And so looking back then, from like prior to like February 2020, like can you see things in your life that kind of built up to it, or that like make sense now that you have this label, or however you want to
Mm-hmm.
phrase it? Some people don't like to say that, like to
Yeah.
label things. I think it does kind of help in a way that it kind of it gives you this like the relief
Mm-hmm.
that it's like, okay, that kind of makes things make sense a little bit more. Can you see if there like was a pattern leading up now that you have more of a
There are,
definition?
yeah, there were plenty of patterns, there were plenty of signs. I think my body was giving me all the signs I needed, but I was very good at just pushing it under the rug.
Sure.
And I just call it, my Feb 2020 was my pressure cooker moment where it just burst.
That
There
was
was
it.
no
Yeah.
more holding it in. But one of the things that I realized was what happened in Feb 2020. I was like, okay, now I'm going to be very disciplined. I'm going to be careful about the work that I do, the work environment that I'm in, and make sure that I'm staying away from toxic political environments are not a place for me to thrive. And it literally
Yeah.
put me down, right? So made sure I put the right guardrails. I was working 24/7 ish in a weird way because I had teams around the world, and I didn't really put the right disciplines for me. So I was like, okay, next job that I go into, I'm going to put on all those disciplines. And then I changed jobs. I got into a company where it was again that same talk. Like, we were all remote, but I could, like, I'm a very highly sensitive person, is what I've learned in the past year.
Yeah.
And because of that, like, even a little bit of like stress or anything in the environment, I tend to absorb it very, very badly. And so that took a toll on me in October 2021, where I was walking the Chicago River Walk and with a friend, and in split seconds I knew something was off. Like, I could feel my stomach was rumbling, and I was like, okay, I see a wall, I just need to go to the wall and I'll be okay. I blacked out. I don't know what
Hmm.
happened between that moment, and then I fell, I scarred my face, and I was like, Div, this is the last sign. You need to listen to your body. Stop doing whatever you're doing, because this work thing is not
Yeah.
really working for you. And that
Yeah.
that was the only sign that I needed. So I stopped my full-time job. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. And mentoring was
But
the
this
only
isn't
thing
working.
that gave
Yeah.
me the sense of fulfillment. And now I'm just
Yeah.
doubling down on that. But the signs were always there. I just didn't pay attention to it. And so now
Yeah.
I'm very careful on what kind of work I do, what kind of environment that I'm in. And that has dramatically changed how I look at life itself, right? Like, just
Yeah.
appreciating the little joys of life, if you will.
And I mean, and I don't want to say like later on in life because you're younger than me, but I mean, you said 39, right? And
Yeah.
like for a lot of people, that's like this took so long to get here. Like this is terrible that I let myself get here. But you sound like it's I don't like you said grateful, but it's
Mhm.
like almost like you hear that and you're like, yeah, well, at least I got here.
Well, and
How do
that's
you?
where I am, right?
Yeah,
Like, at least I got here,
yeah,
and at least I didn't have to go through medication to get to where I got to, right? I was very adamant with my doctor. I was like, I've seen my aunt actually have challenges because she's pretty much lived her life on pills, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to
it's not
take
what you.
medication if I can escape it. And
Yeah,
I'm glad that I made that choice, because most people don't have that choice, right? I think
no,
there is
right.
plenty of stats where we are either on some sort of medication or we just can't get out of it, and be that like anything, right? So I think I'm really blessed that I didn't have to go through that experience, because
Yeah.
sometimes you do get addicted to the medication and you can't really get out of it. And I've had people share those stories with me once I shared mine. And I was like, okay, I'm glad that CBT is there, but it's not the end all be all, right? Like, if you have the right communities, we can bring people together and just help them share their stories. It takes away a weight from you, and it
Sure.
makes you feel like, okay, you're not by yourself in this. There are other people to support you, and that's, I think, what we're all trying to do, right? Like, together we
Yeah.
can heal and make that change happen. So it's very interesting how things work out. But if you'd
Yeah.
asked me at that point in time when I was going through it, I would have been like, this is the worst thing that could ever happen. But
Sure.
hindsight, now I'm like, actually, I'm glad whatever happened. I mean, not in the best way. Like, I feel like everything has to go down before something can rise up. And so
Yeah.
this is probably my example of the phoenix rising in some way, where I had to
Sure.
like crash and then get to where I'm going. So I just hope that anybody who's listening, or anyone that's even having an inkling of like something is not right, just go talk to people, right? Anybody
Mhm.
that is your confidant, and for me, it wasn't even like family that I felt comfortable sharing. I had few folks that I shared, and then there was a group which was part of the fearless training program that I was in, and we were a group of four, few of them in Australia, few in the US and Canada. And these were complete strangers, but just hearing their stories and them just listening to my
That's it.
stories
Yeah.
just gave me the time to heal. And I think time is the biggest healer, right? Like, for me,
Yeah.
nature was great. Like, just getting out and walking in nature gave me the, I don't know, the peace of mind that I was missing, and it
Yeah.
allowed me to slow down my life. I think that was the biggest thing. Like, I was on this rat race, if you will, and I was like, I'm done with the rat race. Like, there is no end to this vicious cycle. It's just go, go, go. And I don't
Yeah.
want to live like that. Like, I've been the most creative, the most productive in the past 2 years that I've ever been in my career and my life. And I'm like, that's what I want to be. Like, I want to help
Yeah.
people. That's my ikigai. So I'm glad whatever happened, whichever way and shape. I don't think I would change anything
Yeah.
to have got to where I did. But I think growing up, I always had anxiety in some shape or form, but I just didn't know
Yeah.
it. And I think just being a sensitive kid also brings that part in you.
Yeah. And you talk about all these like simple tools that you hear over and over again too, right? I mean, just getting out in nature, like telling yourself
Hmm.
to get out of these toxic environments. You mentioned mindfulness, meditation.
Hmm.
These are all things you hear like over and you say it like, yep, that worked, and like simple, but
Hmm.
it's like for a lot of people, it's not. Why do you feel that it came so easy that yeah, this is what's going to work for me, and why it maybe doesn't necessarily come as easy for others, that it's like, not what you want me to share, what about myself and
Yeah, yeah.
go for a walk that's going to fix this? No, there's got to be something else. Why do you think that is for you?
I think so. If you ask me, how did I find mindfulness? I don't really have an answer, because I felt like I stumbled upon it in, I would say, March of 2020, when I had like my system had completely shut down. I could
Yeah.
barely read a few words, and I was like, okay, I need to get back to like being functional. And somewhere along the way, I think Blinkist had these 15-minute summaries, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna like start there. Like, if I can at least absorb
Do
something in
something.
those
Yeah.
15 minutes, that's something, right? And somewhere along those ways, I found one of these mindful books, and Thich Nhat Hanh then became my teacher in all theory and practice,
Yeah.
because he had this concept of savoring, right? Like, he had this idea where he said, when you eat an orange, eat an orange. Like, don't think about, oh, I need to like do this next thing, or I need to now
Hmm.
think about this meeting that I have to go to, or oh, what my manager said the other the other hour, or something, like just being in this present moment. And it sounded very cliche when I heard it. I was like, huh, it's one of those gimmicky like things that's there. But then
Sure. Right.
when I actually put it into practice, so when I actually joined a new company, I was like, I'm going to try to be fully present. I was
Yeah.
adept at multitasking. I took pride in my multitasking. I was like, I am going to focus on single tasking. That's what I'm going to do. And
Yeah.
if I'm talking to somebody, that's the only screen I have,
That's
right?
it.
This was the time we were in COVID. Everybody's going through a tough time. My team was in 10 countries around the world. I knew that everybody was going through their own struggles in different ways. I could see how COVID was playing out in all these countries, right? From the US to South America to Europe to Asia. And all I could do was just be there for them. That's
Yeah.
the least I could do, right? So I took mindfulness in that simple training of being like, when I'm talking to you, you are the only thing
This
that
is it.
matters right now, and that's it. And I think that gave me the grounding. Like it was not as like I've tried meditation, but I can barely keep my attention beyond 2 seconds or 2 minutes. But this little thing of being mindful, like whatever I'm doing. So if I'm eating, I made a conscious choice to be like, I'm just going to focus on
I'm
my
eating.
eating, not watching TV or attending a meeting, because that was what I was doing before. I would have my full day's calendar packed, and people were like, hey, do you have 30 minutes? And I'm like, I do have 30 minutes in my lunchtime. Do you want that? And then I would give it away, and I would be like barely eating and barely talking.
Yeah.
Like that probably
It's
impacted
not
my health in a
sustainable.
bad way,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't sustainable. So now I literally have like a mindful calendar. I have my breakfast blocked off, my lunch blocked off, my dinner blocked off. Everything else fits in beyond that, not in
Yeah.
those slots,
Not
right? So
within it. Right.
yeah, not within it. And I think that helped. I think walking, like I remember when I went to the doctor a few days after, like once I decided I was going to take that 2 month leave, the doctor was like, hey, what did you do? You look better already. I'm like, I stopped crying. That was a big thing, I guess. But he was like, yeah, just, I was like, I went to my manager. My manager said from the next day, so it was Thursday that I went and told him. And he was like, I would say the best manager ever, because I don't think anybody would have given me that, like, hey, Div, we got this. We'll figure out what's happening.
Yeah.
And from Friday, I was like, okay, I'm not going to work. What do I do? I'm in San Francisco. I love the Fisherman's Wharf. So I walked a good hour to Fisherman's Wharf. It was freezing cold, felt like Feb temperature. And I took off my shoes, dipped my feet in the cold water, and it comforted me, like in a weird way. I don't know. The ocean does magic for me every time. So I did that. The next day, I was like, it's the weekend. The magnolia was in bloom, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go see where these magnolias are. I went to Ocean Beach, did the same thing, dipped myself in the water. It took like over an
Simple.
hour and a half to get there because the trains were all walked up or something. But I got there and I was like, that's all I needed. I just needed to like
That's all
walk
we need.
around, just connect myself with nature, and
Yeah.
it did magic in ways that I can't really put words into, but it was doing something. It was helping me
It was
just
doing something. Yeah.
ground myself. It was helping me reconnect with with the universe in some way, and that's it. That's all what
Yeah.
mindfulness is for me. Like it's nothing gimmicky or like, oh, you have to like do these
Mhm.
10 things and that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
just understand who you are, and I think getting comfortable with like listening to that inner voice, because now me and my inner voice are best friends. that counsel that I really pay attention to the counsel, because I know it's trying to tell me something, and every
Yeah.
time I try not to listen to it, it doesn't end well. So now
It
I've
doesn't work
now
out.
I've given in and be like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm just going to listen to you because you're telling me that something is not working. And I think
Yeah.
those signs, as much as we talk about the mind and gut connection, and I've been reading like a lot about it, it's true,
Yeah.
right? Like our
It's
gut
true.
is
Very true.
the
Yeah.
biggest brain, the brain mind out there. And
Yeah.
if we don't listen to it, like I've heard folks say, hey, we have IBS and all of these symptoms. And I'm like, it's just the environments. And the
Yeah.
worst part is we don't really do anything about the environments, and we think, okay, medication or something else externally is going to solve the problem. And that's what I think troubles me the most, because I wish that we took more time to make the environments much more
Yeah.
conducive, where it's more fostering a safe environment where we feel good about who we are and that we can actually be our best selves. So
Yeah.
that's I think my biggest learning so far.
Yeah. And I mean, you used a good word there that, like, for a lot of people, it feels gimmicky, but it's still not a magic pill. And
Mm-mm.
I think that's what people are like thinking that it's going to be. And there was a good example there that, like, for it stops you and just looking at that moment. And, like, we kind of gloss over it and go, like, just be in the moment. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think for me, it's a lot more than that. It gives you, like you said, the brain space to go,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I keep telling people I don't have time for this or I don't have time for that. And you probably really do. You just either filled it with other things,
Yeah.
or you're so caught up in the moment along with like other moments at the same time. And that's hard, right? I mean, your brain is always moving, but it's being able to sit in that dinner table or that conversation with somebody and just be in that conversation kind of opens up the rest of it and go, okay, dipping my
Indeed.
feet in water did just simply work because like I'm allowing myself to feel
Hmm.
everything in that moment versus, well, my feet are in the water, but I also have a meeting at 2,
Yeah.
it's that. And I think for so many people, that's like, it's a lot of work, but it like,
Hmm.
that's why it feels gimmicky because it's like, there's no way that you're going to tell me that by just sitting here and just eating an orange and eat an orange is going to work for everything. And we get caught up in like, as well, like that there's got to be other fixes to it,
Hmm.
or like, that you need all these steps and then it goes away, and it's not like you just gained yourself a tool to use, one of many, to fix in a situation, but there's never going to be one solution,
There
right? I
never is.
mean,
Yeah.
there's an
Yeah.
ongoing process of listening and really, like you said, doing the work for yourself.
It is, and it's unbelievable the focus that I had in the past. Like
Sure.
when I left my job in November 2021, I was like, what do I do? Like I had started writing about my story. I called it a broken teacup, filling the cracks with mindfulness, essentialism, and self
Yeah.
care. And it was my way of helping others realize that what they're going through is not just a one-off thing. Like we all
Yeah.
have our own stories,
Some
and
version.
all I could think of in that November was this December 2021. So my birthday was May 21, and I was like, 21 is my number. Like I have to like finish this book and self-publish it. And 5 weeks was what I had to get to December 21. And I was like, I'm
Oh
going to make it
gosh.
happen. And it was just that clarity that I had. It was the focus
Yeah.
that I had to get it done. And then come 2022, I ended up like publishing other 3 books. And people are like, how are you even able to do this? And I'm like, I don't know. It was just the focus. That was it.
Yeah.
Like I was not trying to do a million things. I just had this one thing I wanted to get done. And I literally created like a 4 week sprint or a six
Wow.
week sprint. And that was it. Like I was like, people spend years working on books because they're doing a million things, and then whatever little time they have to work on the book, I
They
am
go back to,
giving
yeah.
my full thing to this book, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And I it was phenomenal. I was like, I can't believe I did that by myself. And I didn't even know what self-publishing, like I didn't know many of the things of what it takes to write a book. But same what you were saying about like finding the time, right? I always said, oh, I never have time to read books. And 2020 was when I was like, actually, I want to take away whatever noise is there. So try to stay away from social media, try to stay away from the TV and the news, because all of those things were, as sad as the things were that was happening around that time, it didn't help me.
Yeah.
Like it was just negative information that was just putting me
Yeah.
down. And I was like, I'm going to create whatever environment I need for me to thrive. And so taking away those things gave me the time to read books. And I put myself a goal of 100 books a year. I was like, oh, that's audacious. You serious? You're going to read 100 books? Good luck. But I did it. Like I was able to read because I had made that commitment, and I use
Choice. Yeah.
Goodreads as my counter to be like, I'm not just saying I'm going to do it, I'm actually going to track it, right? So having
Yeah.
some way to like say, hey, this is important for me, I'm going to make the time for it. And now
Yeah.
in the past 3 years, I have been able to keep up. And every year I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to that 100 books a
That same.
year challenge. And it was a fun way to just get me to read more, but it was also a way for me to like learn what else is out there, right? Like the mind gut
Yeah.
connection that I told you about, Thich Nhat Hanh's books that are out there. So sometimes they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I felt like Thich Nhat Hanh was like that for me, because I was at a
You were
very bad
ready.
shape in
Yeah.
my life, and I was like, I needed somebody to just show me the way, and I consider that my guiding light in some way. And
Yeah.
it's just phenomenal, like the things that you come across. Like recently I was reading a book by Pema Chodron where she talks about the places that will scare you. And I was like, oh, that title definitely rings a bell, because I'm
Yeah.
traveling and I'm really scared. Traveling by myself, doing solo travel and doing slow travel. Because I just don't want to just travel for the sake of travel. I want to like experience the place. I want to
Yeah.
experience the culture, the food, everything. And just finding those books, I feel like that's just like how I came across mindfulness in 2020, right? Like
Yeah.
things will come find you when you're ready for it. And so
When you're
if
ready.
mindfulness doesn't feel right for you, if you're like, okay, these things, walks, all of those things don't feel right for you, just find what works for you. Doesn't have to be any big magic pill, or doesn't have to be, oh, I need to do so many things to rewire whatever I'm doing. Just listen to your heart and mind, and it'll tell you what you need to do.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing your story.